Good afternoon. Welcome. Stay awake after lunch. I dare you. All right, let's get rolling because I am going to make this worth your while to the best of my ability. My name is Matsuda. I'm an Apple systems engineer with an MSP called Entiva. I'm managing thousands of Apple endpoints across hundreds of different organizations in dozens of industries, which has been a lot of fun but has its own unique challenges. For those of you I've met in the past, great to see you again. You may or may not remember me as the person who talks a lot about opera. When I'm not doing this, I'm directing operas. I'm also playing traditional Japanese music on Chicago's North Side because why not? We all have pandemic hobbies. You'll see me online under the handle Sirius in the Mac Admin Slack, and of course you can check out sudoaid.com, which is my Apple technology blog. I post some of the neat things I find throughout my day job up there, if that has value to you. There will also be sudoaid stickers up in the front if you want one by the end of the evening for this non-existent brand. But for today, we are talking about post-installation visibility, and since that starts with post, that means this got to start with everyone's favorite introduction email or someone leaning over your cubicle, and that's, hey, we need you to do a thing. And we all know where this goes. There's lots of things that this may turn into, but more often than not, it's, hey, we're deploying an app. Can you help us deploy an app? Great. And the usual suspects here. We're only targeting certain computers, not the whole fleet. That's fine. You do some testing. You find out what permissions are required for the thing. You get everything built. You start to roll this out, and no, we need bulk licensing. Okay, so we're registering online, we're figuring out all these little things we have to do to get this out the door, and you're feeling confident, right? You've written the cleanest code you can, you've written tons of inline comments for your future self, right? You've documented this thing like crazy for your other administrators or for your users, right? Because it's just as important to document facing them as it is for yourself and for the rest of your team. You know, you've tested this thing like crazy in VMs and in test hardware with a couple users and departments. You're feeling confident, and holy smokes, the dust settles. You have successfully done the thing. We are not talking about any of that stuff on the last slide because you already did the thing. That being said, congrats. It's a wonderful day, proud day for you and your family. And now that that's all set to go, you can get back to what you normally do with the rest of your time. You're taking a look at your fleet. You're trying not to think about some of those later bullet points. And then someone asks you a question, and you need to start thinking about them. And that's when it hits you. Now that that's wrapped, this is kind of still your responsibility. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. We're going to take a look at what you're supposed to do once that first step is done, and now you've got to prove your worth and move forward from there. Before we really dig into that, I want to make this point, and that is whenever you're pushing an application out to your fleet, the end goal is rarely, oh, we all really wanted Adobe Acrobat on these computers because we love that piece of software, and then when the rectangle glows that way, we feel joy. Usually you're solving a problem. And that problem is going to be different in every organization, and that problem might be different at different times for your organization. But you need to understand that when someone asks you to do a thing, they are trying to solve a problem. You need to know what that is so we know what's going to be useful for you going forward. Once you've got that figured out or started to think about it, we can get into the nitty-gritty, and this is the more fun techie stuff, right? Why did you push it to any given individual device? And these are some of the basics you're used to. It wasn't on the machine. It was an out-of-date version. Maybe get some really fun use cases where when you run the package, it does something cool in user space, right? And so maybe it's the first time users logged into that workstation in a new account. Okay, we'll loop it again, so be it. Now that you've thought about the why, you got to think about what you actually did to that machine, because the best answer for that is usually not, I ran installer pkg this thing, thank you, goodbye. You got to figure out what files are being written or edited or deleted when that package is running. Huge shout out here to the application suspicious package. This thing is incredible. You can feed it a PKG file, and it's going to tell you where in the OS it's writing files once it's executed, and it'll also give you some visibility into your pre- and post-installation scripts. So you can get a ton of information there that normally you'd have to pull apart manually just by installing, uninstalling, uninstalling, and so on and so forth. A lot of times when we're talking about the macro level work we do, we talk about desired device state. Right? You get something in through ADE, you're pushing apps, you're pushing configuration profiles, you want the Mac to look and feel a certain way. We're zooming in a little bit here. So we're going to be talking about desired application state. As we are researching this, as we're trying to pull out some information, we're going to do our best to respect best practices. You've seen how certain developers store this information in your computer. We're going to be going through that. And anything that you're writing, you are going to do your best to continue to reinforce those best practices. That's great. That being said, don't always expect everyone to do the same. And so you got prepared to be a little self-motivated, do a little digging, and sometimes in some weird places to find what we're going to be looking for. On the point of why do this at all, because in our increasing SaaS world where buying isn't ownership, you have a lot of access to this sort of data in the cloud, right? You get something from Adobe, you can pull up a lot of great information about your licensing and applications there. But, as we all know, not every application has a cloud portal. So your visibility could be limited depending what your app stack looks like, and suddenly the only place we can go is the local machine. If you do have the benefit of a cloud site, you can learn some great things, right? You've got an entire development team from your publisher that is storing information in a way that feels intuitive to them, that they hope is intuitive to you. So you can go in there, you can look it up, you get a lot of great information straight from them. The problem with this starts to come up with larger software stacks. If you have a lot of these cloud-based apps that you're running, suddenly you're not logging into 1 or 2 portals, you're logging into 5 or 10. If you're working in the MSP space and you have a wide client base, this doesn't feel very scalable, as you go through that. So that decentralization is kind of problematic. As we have all these different portals that we're now logging into to get basic information about these applications, all right, now we got to figure out how to read each one. Because even though there is someone dedicated to trying to make that easy for you because they want it to be, if it's easy for you, it's easy for people to adopt their software, it still takes some time to adjust. And what feels intuitive to one organization might not feel intuitive to you. That's okay. Folks here are probably already thinking, well, heck, let's just use API calls to bring all this stuff into a single location. And if that's your speed, more power to you. Love it, make it happen. That's not everyone's speed, and that's also not everyone's skill set. And you need to be able to do some of this stuff even before you're ready to start pulling all this information and using some of these more advanced tools. So we want to have some ways to make that work as well. I'll mention this a couple times, just to slide it across the table and see how it lands. Always also consider the security ramifications of how you're using your API keys and credentials. Even if you don't think about it much, your InfoSec team probably does. And they want to make sure that that data is accounted for at rest and in transmission and wherever you're storing it and wherever you're surfacing it. Local storage does have some sweet benefits that the cloud doesn't. I think one of the major ones is as long as you're keeping your queries offline, and that's a major if, this can be really, really fast. Right? Because ideally, we're going to be putting these scripts together in just a couple lines. Like 1 to 20 lines of code would be great, and that's going to execute in milliseconds. Perfect. If you now have 200 of these after you've been in your MDM for 5-6 years, oh no, it takes 2 seconds to do a scrape. Your users will survive, and you're going to have a ton of useful information. We like that. Again, just leaning back in that security thing, keeping it local on the device. We are not risking surfacing our API keys. We are not hashing them and decrypting them on devices. It's just less to worry about as far as opening up those threat vectors in your environment. And as much as we love the fact that most of our software does what we want it to do most of the time, it has this nagging habit where it doesn't do it all the time. And when stuff goes offline, it's a real nuisance. Because maybe the cloud portal just tells you, hey, I can't check in with this device, I've got nothing to tell you. There's still probably something on the Mac. And that can give you a really big step up to either interface with your support desk to know what your next steps are, or maybe you can auto-remediate. If you detect a certain state that you've seen in the past, you can just run something totally in the background and not have to think about it in the future. That being said, when the machine's not talking to the cloud, boy, can that data get stale. And that's not ideal. And so when you're pulling this data from your device, especially if you're seeing some inconsistencies, that can sort of escalate if you're heavily relying on this local-only data. So always have your eyes out when you're looking at this and make sure your returns are valid. Many developers do not expect us to be doing what we're about to try to do. And so they don't document it super well. This isn't for everybody, this is for some organizations. And so be aware that you may need to get kind of inventive to figure out what's actually happening to these applications, where it's storing this information, how that information is being listed. In an ideal situation, okay, it's not super well documented, but we can figure it out. But some proactive developers may decide, man, we really don't want people horsing around in these directories because they do the wrong thing. They're going to really mess up our software. It's going to put it in a state we don't expect, and that can cause issues. So some folks will deliberately make the information hard to get. They're going to put it in really unusual places. They're going to hide it. They're going to put it inside encrypted databases. You need to do some basic SQL to get stuff out of there. We don't know, but we're going to have to try to find out. And mostly, because of these things, this data is fragile. I feel like I'm talking about AppleScript again. Because this isn't super documented, most developers won't think twice about changing it, even during minor point releases. Because who's using it except them? They don't expect us to be diving into all these directories. And so this means you've got to keep up with your testing once you get this sort of thing into production, especially if you're using things like this information to influence conditional access. Right? You don't want your whole fleet to go out of compliance because Cisco changed one of the locations of a file that tells them that you're using the umbrella agent. Right? We want to avoid those situations. And one last one for the security folks. You are possibly taking generally hidden or difficult to find information about application state on this Mac. You are surfacing it, you are storing it in a way that your MDM can read. What are the ramifications of making that easy to read? Similarly, what are the ramifications of other employees at your organization looking into your MDM and seeing this information? If you're surfacing it there, if you're in high trust environments, other security environments, you've got to be aware of who has access to this and when. But if it's worth doing right. And so let's assume that we're still going through with this. It's going to be great. You started off where you normally do. You've built your installer. We love to see it. And as long as you're building an installer and you're going to be testing regularly, you've probably built an uninstaller. If you haven't, please do. They're lovely, because then you can install, uninstall just rapidly on multiple devices. You can watch directories, see how things change, see how the user experience changes. As you're doing that, we're likely going to assume that you're not installing a piece of software that you foresee will never receive another update for the rest of time. So we've got a version check. We love that. With those installations of new versions, we need to know what's unique about our updater logic, right? Does the developer recommend that you uninstall first? Does the developer recommend that you invoke a command line tool and point it towards the package you want to use? Because maybe if you run the installer in place, you're going to get a user-facing error, right? You don't want your fleet seeing that every half an hour for 3 days and then blowing up the support desk. If you're not pushing this to literally every computer in your fleet, and sometimes even if you are, I would recommend giving users a self-remediation option. This is great, especially for troubleshooting, right? So you don't have to rely on your MDM's check-in cadence or a support desk technician always sitting there and helping people push this through. Let your users do it themselves. And the last thing, what we're focusing on here is custom attributes, device facts, extension attributes, whatever your platform calls them. These are going to be specific pieces of script output that tell us useful things so that if somebody comes to you asking for a report, you don't have to start from scratch. You can be like, oh, I figured you'd probably ask me about that. Here it is for 400 machines. On that note, first thing to begin with is who is going to be talking to you about this. We said that every application is solving, ideally, please, every application is solving a problem for your company. And depending on what that problem is, that's going to dictate who's going to be coming to you with questions. Right? It could be end users, could be support desk, could be management, could be C-level, InfoSec, whatever. Know where you believe these folks are going to be approaching you from, and based on that, you can start to think about what questions they're going to ask you. You are going to, unsurprisingly, turn those questions into these scripts, into these device facts, so that we can be pulling this on a regular cadence. And in a perfect world, giving these folks access to recurring reports that generate this before they come to you needing anything. We'd rather just avoid that entire situation. Your MDM is actually kind of important for this, right? This is all the stuff we're going to talk today is Bash and Z Shell, so it's pretty universal, which we love. But your MDM and how frequently it pulls your machines is going to have a drastic impact on what's valuable to you to scrape. Because if your MDM is consistently polling every 5 minutes, Having a Boolean come back and tell you, oh, this user's on the VPN right now, wonderful. Really powerful, gives you a lot of information. If it scrapes once every 8 hours or once a day, that's not giving you the full picture of what that user's up to, what that application's up to. So always bear in mind your unique environment for all of this, which I suppose goes without saying. For a thought experiment, the thing that you've been asked to deploy is endpoint backup. You love to see it. We don't want to lose those home folders. So we're going to talk about Bob. We all like Bob. Is Bob's computer backed up? Well, let's see if we can go into the application, find out some basics. Is the backup complete? We can just get a true or false. If it's false and it stays false for long enough, we reach out to Bob. That's fine. We can hopefully automate that too. Once we got that backup in there, if someone comes up and says, yeah, we were sure that backup's actually Bob's data. He was using someone else's machine. All right, fine. Let's see if we can pull up a username out of that application, a specific email address that's logged into the service or licensed to. Maybe Bob lost a file he was working on 2 days ago. All right, great. Let's see when his last backup was. If we can pull it up and just give them a quick yes, get this to the backup team, they'll see what they can pull out. Maybe Bob is saying he's getting notification there's no room. We could pull that, stay ahead of it too. And in certain situations, maybe Bob was using the consumer version of this application. Then we started licensing it as an organization. We want to make sure he's actually sending it to the business version, not the consumer servers. So we're also going to go ahead, check that backup status, whether it's preparing or already finished or pending, and the server URL. Now, this sort of list is the kind of thing that we can pull from a lot of different applications on your systems. I'm going to bang through this quickly because I'm going to get folks out of here on time, I promise. Same thing for endpoint protection and response. Is the application installed? Bare minimum, we want to start with that. That's all well and good. But for certain apps, we might be able to talk to it and see what PPPCs are still invalid. It could give us some information about errors that the user might be receiving in the GUI, or if it's not able to complete a scan. If certain EDR tools might not focus on serial number as a primary identifier. I've seen that with a couple that I've looked at, in which case host name is fine but not great, but maybe the EDR itself is storing a local identifier or UID of some kind that we can talk to and pull in. Great, let's pipe that out as well. Optional features or license types if you have different tiers within your organization, and then of course, same as with the backup solution, we love getting server URLs, especially if you have a lot of different locations or you've changed security vendors and you have some folks that are in limbo going from one vendor to another. This can be a huge red flag to stay ahead of before it turns into a problem. There we go, nice and on time. Okay. Actually pulling this information out from local storage on a device. There's a couple places we're going to be looking, and we're going to start with the relatively obvious one, but it always bears repeating. Check your developer documentation first. We love reinventing wheels. It's a heck of a good time. It makes you feel great. But some of those wheels are totally worth using. And especially if you're in a time crunch, that's going to be an advantage for you if you can do it. Generally speaking, a lot of this information, if folks are following standard practices these days, you're going to see a lot of data in plist files. We're looking at property list files. Certain applications, especially more complex ones, especially like permanently running agents, we might be lucky enough to have access to a CLI tool. So I'll want to talk to those, see what sort of pre-formatted output we can get from there. If things are getting a little more esoteric, maybe we're just taking a look at flag files. So we want to know what's happening on this computer at one time. Well, I stared at it long enough, I learned enough about the application, I know this directory or this file will not exist or is deleted when the app does a certain thing. So the greater your familiarity with the behavior in application, the more valuable flag files become. One of the lower hanging fruit, but very important, is whether or not the application's just running at all. Right? So we'll talk about ways that you can check your computer to confirm the thing is loaded, and also use launchctl to talk to launch agents and launch daemons to confirm that the computer is regularly trying to force that thing open. And this is important to acknowledge, but hopefully not the case. It is not impossible that this data straight up is not persisted on your Mac. Right? We're not going to assume this right off the bat, because we have to earn that. If someone will come up to us and we need to say with confidence, it's not there, or within our current skill set and my toolkit, we can't surface it. And that's okay. Then that conversation turns into less like, all right, we know it's literally impossible, what do we do? And more of a, we might be able to surface it if you help me hire 2 new people. You can do that, right? We've got the budget for it. But it's a possibility of how much. That's fine. So let's start at the top. Let's start with these property list files. These are lovely. These are all over macOS. You can learn a great amount from them. And one of the best things about them is that they are heavily standardized. Once you learn how to read one of these plist files, it's not a huge stretch to start reading more. And the more you see, the more you'll keep seeing the recurring patterns, not just in how they're written and what they do, but where they live. So usually first place to begin here is going to be the root library or user library preferences folders. Obviously, if you feel that the data you're looking for is user agnostic, or if you think that it might be different for each user, if they can customize it, or if it's storing things like timestamps, right? That might be more in user space instead of the root library. That said, there's a ton of additional places where macOS stores these and where developers are intentionally storing these. As sandboxing has increased in maturity, right? We're going to be looking in our containers and group containers directories. Lots of great stuff being stored in there. Some older school applications and a lot of fresh ones still use the application support directory, and then you're going to have subdirectories for the developer or the application name, or those nested within each other. That's also fine. Those sorts of applications I mentioned where the developers really don't want you messing around with stuff, you're going to start seeing these in other root directories that usually your normal end user is not going to have anything to do with. That's great. So we'll also want to poke around in those. And I'm mentioning this because I find it fascinating, but I hope I will never see it again. I was troubleshooting an older application that will go unnamed, and was having a really rough time finding out where it was storing current runtime data for itself. And after enough poking around, I actually found a plist file inside the .app directory that it was constantly rewriting to. That is obviously no longer a thing with notarization, but especially if you're poking around older information, or if you're doing an MDM migration, you're pulling stuff from a previous stack that this company's old IT used to use, just be aware some of these end up in truly bizarre places. Everybody's favorite EKG machine. If you want, we talked about some places you can probably find a lot of this data. If you want a little bit more of a hint, Activity Monitor is spectacular. If you haven't gone in there and used it for this yet, there's a tab called Open Files and Ports. This is going to give you some great places to start, and let's take a look at what that looks like. Behold, the gray rectangle. We're going to start here. We're going to go up to the magnifying lens, and let's do a search. And we found ourselves a Firefox. Lovely. So if we go up to this process or any other process that we're dealing with, we can give that a double click and get this little details window. Fine, all familiar so far. But over here on the right, we've got Open Files and Ports. We hit that, and we've got a lot to learn and a lot to do. This is lovely. This is all plain text, so you can just select all, copy this out, put it into your text editor of choice, and you can start deleting things you don't want. You can start searching through it. This is, at the time of polling, this should be every file that process is touching. You can see in here that a lot of this is not super useful for the kinds of thing that I would be looking for. It's querying a ton of system fonts. If you're looking for fonts, great, it's a font list. But I would normally go through here and start looking in some of those locations we mentioned before. What files are you seeing it reference inside of user space? What's in a library? What's in the opt directory? Things like that. So get this thing up, get rid of the stuff that you don't care about, and start looking in these directories. I mentioned that this was at time of polling, and sometimes an application is not writing to a plist 24/7. And so this is not completely exhaustive, because otherwise you need to poll it in that, those couple milliseconds it's talking to any individual file to write data. Brilliant place to begin, though. So let's take a look at one of these guys and get oriented. This is the preferences file in the user library for Box Desktop, Box Sync. And who doesn't love a wall of text? That won't hurt your eyes, it's a wall of text. So, the more you blur your eyes, the more you'll start to see patterns. Patterns are good. We're going to start off with a header. Header up here is terrible to read, so we're going to blow that up. And this is going to tell you some useful things right off the bat. First thing it says, this is XML. Okay, we have some basic rules we can start to follow. We've probably read some XML in the past, and if you haven't, welcome, have fun, enjoy your stay. After we know the language, we know it's XML, we then know the type of document that we're looking at because it's explicitly declared as plist. And this format is public. If you load this URL, you'll get some basic formatting information about how Apple recommends you write plists and use them, which is fun. And then once again, in case you missed it the first time, it's plist version 1. We know what we're looking at. Brilliant. So underneath the header, we've got more, let's get rid of the header. Now that we've gotten the header out of the way, let's talk about the actual information. And if you've ever heard the term key value pairs, boy, are you going to love these. We have a series of key value pairs. And all of these are going to be the name of a property, which is in the key field. So we've got that in angle braces. We have that tag, key, auto update, track, close the key. Right? And then we have the variable type, which for that top one up there, let's blow that up. Top one up there is string. We have our content, and then we close it. That's the show. We're just going to do this over and over and over again. Right? So we have a key for crash detector. We have another key for automatic dash substitution. There we have the output type integer. And so we know what we're reading. One thing that is kind of fun about these, so again, it's just, you're going to see this repeating pattern ad infinitum. That's great. Developers get real saucy with this, though, and I like this. So these absolute chads decided to embed an entire JSON object as a string inside of this plist. So if you are feeling saucy, you can start essentially embedding preference files or objects inside of other ones, act on them inside of your applications, and then rewrite that data as you go. So be creative, expect some weirdness there, but even that JSON object is still inside of a key value pair, just coded as a string. Wouldn't it be great if we could pull a single thing out of there instead of staring at that and crossing our eyes? Yes, we can. First thing we're going to talk about here is the defaults command. Syntax is very, very straightforward. We're going to invoke the tool, say defaults. We're going to give it a verb, read the thing over there, give it that file location, and then query it for a specific key. So there's Steve, tell me Steve's age. So be it. One of the places that you may have seen this early on in your Bash and Z shell exploration is probably just for version checks. Right? These are all over every MDM. And so if we want to query the installed version of an application on a device, we know its path, we know where it lives. We're just going to use that same syntax over and over again. We're going to do defaults, read, give it the location of the file. Right? So we're going into that app bundle, contents, info.plist. This is where you're going to find version data for a ton of apps. And then we're going to tell it the key that we want. And that is CF bundle short version string. You run this, it's just going to spit out the version of the app, and we're moving on. We can act on that. That's great. If we want something a little more interesting, we do not change our syntax at all. We're going to ask that file that we just pulled up for the username, the email address of the currently logged in box sync user. It is exactly the same. We are doing defaults, read, giving it the location of the plist. Here, this one's in user library preferences. Love it. And it turns out, as we were scrolling through that plist file, key is called preferences/login name. Great. Run that. We got Bob's login name. And I cannot stress enough how the same this stays. Here's how you can tell if VLC has automatic updates turned on. Same thing. Run this command. You'll notice this one is, again, in the preferences directory for the user, and it's going to output a 0 or a 1 for whether or not this is the feature's turned on or not, right? 0 is false, 1 is true. It would be great to have multiple ways to do this, because if there's one thing we've all learned, it is not to trust. You'll get your heart broken. plist buddy is wonderful for this. This is another option that is a command you can invoke to do ostensibly the same kind of thing. Syntax is a little bit more complicated, which is why I wanted to save this for second. But it's still a very repeatable syntax. We're pulling up that binary. We're saying, hey, plist buddy, right? It's that user libexec. and then we're going to issue the command argument. We want it to do something. So we're saying -c, the command we're issuing is print. We say print this specific key from a key value pair, and give me, do it to this file, right? Here's the location. The eagle-eyed among you who have not yet succumbed to lunch have probably noticed that the order of these are reversed, right? So defaults asks for a location first, then the key. plist buddy asks for the key first and then the location. Not a huge deal, just remember. Unsurprisingly, again, the syntax is always going to stay the same. These commands are really reliable like that. So we're pulling up plist buddy, we're issuing the print command, and the command, the key that we want the value for is what comes after the colon. So print this thing, give me the short version string of the file at this location. Exact same output. It's going to tell us the version number. It's going to output that key that we've requested. Unsurprisingly, still the same. VLC check, still the same. Well, except for one thing. And this is neat. If you actually run this check against this VLC plist file, it's not going to output 0 or 1. It's going to give you the full Boolean. It's going to tell you true or false, which, reading it casually, is irrelevant. That's fine. We know what it means. But if your scripts or if your extension attributes are expecting a very specific variable type, this could be a problem. So just as you're using these two tools together to make sure you have some redundancy in place, do check your outputs just to confirm, or make sure that your script is output type tolerant, so it doesn't run into issues with this. How about a basic fact? Yeah, we're on time. You love that. We're going to talk about Backup Manager. This is a white label backup solution, endpoint backup solution. And so let's take all of this stuff and put it together. We're going to stay very surface level here, so we're just going to do a version check on it. And the first thing I'd recommend is, as you are writing any sort of device facts or EAs, please make your scripts as generic as possible. It should be your goal, as it, in my opinion, gets on soapbox. It should be your goal to never have to write the same code twice, right? Just do it once, and then you can reuse that snippet for the rest of your career as long as it doesn't explicitly break. Fine. First step to that is pulling out the variables. So ideally, give yourself a really visually clear variables block that even developers, not yourself, will be able to see right away, oh, this is what I need to change. And then ideally, everything after the fold, they don't have to touch unless it starts throwing errors or other problems. So this way, you can just skim it really quick. You can share this with the community, and they'll be able to understand what you're dealing with right away. Basic version check. Does app location exist? Does the app exist? If it does, let's go ahead and call defaults, and this is the exact same command we were looking at earlier. Give me the version number using defaults. Easy. Next up, just in case we get a null return, if for any reason defaults chokes, let's run the exact same command, override that variable, and let's use plist buddy instead. Same command we had earlier. On the off and hilarious chance it still doesn't work, let's say, all right, hands up, you win. Congratulations, crazy little machine. We're just going to echo not available. We don't know what the version is. That's fine. Unfortunate, but fine. We can look at that later. We can sick the support desk on it. Or ideally, we did get a good version number, so we're going to spit that out. And finally, closing up this if statement, if the application wasn't present, we'll output a dash. Now, the reason that I formatted this way, and I acknowledge blessings on all of you for writing cleaner code than me. You're amazing. If we run this loop, we're hopefully going to get a good version number. We all move on with our lives. If we don't, we are going to be able to sort alphabetically to see the difference between devices that have the app installed, but we can't get the version number, versus computers that don't have the app installed. We want to clarify those two device states so that we can ideally use automation to remediate either of them. Maybe it's a permissions error, so if we get NA, we push it into a flex policy or smart group where it overwrites, it's 777's the app, please don't do that, but you get the idea. Or it just pushes it somewhere where it tries to more aggressively install the application or pass out a log for you. Since we said this is all XML, right, it's just very specifically formatted XML, we can kind of start using some of these lessons to look at other non-plist XML files, or just plain text files in general. To do that, we are going to use some slightly different tools, but similar logic, and we're going to do a lot of string manipulation with awkset grep, which is always a good time. So let's pull up one of these. And here's a vibe check for the room. If anybody remembers Sibelius, the music notation software, probably not, that's fine. RIP Sibelius. And this is a Sibelius plist file, or XML file, excuse me, that tells us some basic information about Sibelius on this Mac. You'll notice right at the top, we've got our headers again. We've verified it's still XML, which is good. It looks like XML. You can scan it, and it feels kind of similar. But you'll notice that the doc type is completely different. So this doesn't say plist, doc type plist public. This is doc type configuration system. Also, the about information for this is hosted at sibelius.com. Probably not online anymore. Don't feel like checking right now. That's OK. And then even after that, now that we've called the type, it's a configuration type, all of the rest of these tags are slightly different. The entire structure is slightly different. We've got a configuration that holds playback, that holds VST, that holds a list of devices. Right, we've got those guys tackled in here. Those of you playing the home game have probably realized this is not what this would look like in production. So let's expand it. And since this is just raw XML, it's up to the developer how they want to format everything else inside of it. We know the basic rules, but it's up to them to do the details. And for this, instead of key value pairs, we just have XML elements. And so each XML element property has a unique element name that's stuck in angle braces. That's great. So we've got short name, long name, display name. And then the content of that element is what we would expect to see wrapped inside of the key. And then, that's the values on the inside. Name is in the tag, values on the inside. We've got short name, long name, all sorts of items we can pull here. For the sake of today's shenanigans, let's pretend we're really interested in the data file entries. Okay. So we're going to grep it. Grep is just a quick command that's going to do a search inside that text file. We're going to look for the string data file. We're going to feed it a location and see what it comes out with. Notice this, again, is in a slightly different location. We're still in user space, that's fine, but this is inside of application support. Then again, we've got those subdirectories, right? For the developer, Avid, and then the application, Sibelius 7.5. Keep digging, we get our XML file. We run this, we get our 2 hits. Turns out that XML file had 2 devices, and each of those devices had a data file entry. This is great. We've learned what we want to learn. But the formatting's not ideal, so let's clean that up just a touch. We're going to use a couple awk commands here. And this is intentionally a little hideous. Bear with me. Wouldn't it be great to remove those tags so we just get the actual value we want? We, as the admin looking at this in our MDM, we know it's a data file. We named the fact data file. Fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this awk command and set a custom delimiter to a close bracket. That's that guy right there. So it's going to start the front of the line, hit the close bracket. That's why we put that in quotes after the -f. And we're going to tell it to print everything after that close bracket. So print number 2, number 1 would be before it. Great. Run this. 1 down. Good place to begin. And let's just do the same darn thing, except this time we're going to look for the open angle brace. And we're going to say, give me everything before this next angle brace, because we already cleared out the other ones. Add that pipe as well. We have much more intelligible and usable formatted data. We can use this list and pull this up. Now, as mentioned, I am very, very tired. And so if you want to write cleaner code than this and get a bigger jump into these tools, please, please, please watch William Smith's presentation from last year called awkset grep. William is a spectacular speaker if you've not had the privilege of attending one of his workshops or sessions before. And during this, he goes through the history of these tools, the state of technology when they were made, and that goes a long way to inform you why their syntax is the way it is. Because just looking at it at a glance, it can feel really intimidating. He does a great job demystifying this. Cannot recommend it enough. There we go. Hear, hear. Note to self, drink water. All right. Yay, scripts. let's talk about CLI tools. Maybe we're lucky enough that our developers give enough a specialized tool that we can invoke at will and pull pre-formatted data out of it. That would be great. So it can do some of this logic for us and just gives us the information we need. Like many other things, I would strongly recommend starting with the developer documentation, because a lot of times devs, once they build this, are really proud of it. They like using it, otherwise they wouldn't build it. And so you can learn a lot about how to invoke these things from them, assuming it exists. Multiple applications that I've worked on deploying over the years have these tools, but no one seems to know it, including the devs. They don't post about it online. So that being said, if you are poking around for one of these, please use a VM or other test device before you open up folders and start double-clicking binaries all over your computer. You are going to thank yourself for that later. Common commands you're going to find in these. Ideally, we're really angling for help commands, because that'll give you the syntax and what to expect from certain subcommands when you invoke these things. And since today we're really just talking about reading data, not actually remediating or changing things on the system, we're going to focus more on like version data, or if there's a status command that gives us an overall look at the application, we're going to focus on those more than actually write and executes. First off, let's see one of these in action. This is from Sentinel-1, and Sentinel-1 has a great CLI tool called Sentinel-CTL. This is very mature. It's been in the space for a long time. Pretty well documented. If you do poke around online for this, though, just through Google, you're going to see a lot of third-party information, which is good. It's a lot of people who've gone through the steps and are going to give you some beginning points, right, to jump into this. However, a lot of the Sentinel-1 first-party information is locked behind a subscription. So you have to actually have a portal to log into, and then you can get into their knowledge base, pull the rest of what you need. So let's try it. We poked around online. We learned that this tool exists. So we're going to go into terminal and cause some problems. And we're going to run this sucker. And that's kind of anticlimactic, but good to know. So, all right, fine, let's try this again. So we're going to sudo sentinelctl. And we get a prompt. And prompts are great in the GUI, and prompts are not as much fun for a lot of types of scripting. So you're in here, you can start typing things. You don't know what it's going to do when you start typing things. And since this is a tool that can act on the Sentinel-1 agent on a computer, maybe you don't just want to start hammering at your keyboard. But there's a couple things that you can try out first. A lot of these tools will use a similar syntax. Again, we are hoping that developers are using some best practices we've seen in other places. So we can try -h, double-h, or just a plain request for help. And then, of course, exit or quit if you want to bail out. A lot of times it's really that simple. If you feel kind of stuck and you're not exactly sure where to go with this thing, oftentimes Control-C will just do an unclean loadout of that prompt and get you back to where you started. Fine. So we know since we're scripting this, let's bounce out of that. So we're just going to do a basic query for help. Please do the thing. Holy smokes, it's a thing. When you run Sentinel-CTL's help command, this is the kind of output you can expect from a lot of different types of CLI tools, where it's going to tell you how to use it, and then all of the subcommand, just some general descriptions about it. And then sometimes you can do help, and then list the subcommand, get more detailed information. Since, again, we are just reading, we are not writing at the moment, we are particularly interested in things like version and status. It's a little on the nose. That's how you know it's a pre-scripted presentation. So we can pull those up. All right, give me the version. It's a version. You can now just output this as is and say we're done and it's great. Or you can use some basic string manipulation, just get the number. If you just want the number, that's fine. Let's try out that status subcommand since we know that works well too. Okay. And we just get an embarrassment of riches. And that is lovely. We immediately see that we can pull the version command here from this command as well. We can be more specific if we want, but if we want a wider pull, we can get that and maybe concatenate a series of results. We can get this list of missing authorizations. Remember I mentioned that certain applications might be able to tell you about PPPC errors? Sentinel-1's one of them. It lets you know if full disk access is off. It lets you know if there's a problem with the network extension. And then something a little bit more straightforward is, sure, the app's installed, but is security even turned on? Sure, yeah, protection's enabled. We love that. So let's take this and build it into a script, right? So we're going to build an example fact here, and we're just going to ask, is Sentinel-1 connected? Easy enough. As we dive into this, and as you start playing with scripting access to CLI tools, I would recommend trying it outside of the context of a script, just so you know how long it takes to invoke. A lot of CLI tools are almost instantaneous to pull up and run. Some of them might take longer than you'd expect. And so just be aware of that, and how, as you scale and use more of these types of scripts, how that might impact how long it takes your devices to scrape and check in. Also be aware that in certain weird circumstances, yeah, maybe a couple invocations overlap with each other. See if the CLI tool gets really upset if there's multiple instances of it running simultaneously. Checking that out in a controlled situation is way better than finding out about it later when you're starting to get really bizarre results from your MDM. So we're going to start with a simple bailout. I'm a huge fan of bailouts in your scalable scripts. If the tool's not there, don't do anything else. Don't waste the clock cycles, don't waste your time, just get out, right? Shut the door. If sentinelctl is not present, we're already done here. If it is present, let's bring it up. We're going to use that same status command, and we're going to look for output for the command connected, right? So we want to see what that parameter is, and there's our output just for this first part up to the bolded whatnot. Yes, it's connected. Great. Hideous, but great. So let's fix the hideous part. Using that same awk command we've been doing before, just to start cutting out things we don't need, we're going to use the colon as a delimiter and get rid of everything before that. So we're going to awk f and print number 2, get everything after that colon. And then we can use a trim command to get rid of the white space to just pull that thing over to the side. And now we've got a standard string as an output. No white space, no jargon, it's just yes or no. And since we know we're expecting yes or no, let's do stuff with yes or no. If that output is yes, great, it's true. If the output's no, it's false, easy peasy. But we're also going to put a little catch here, and I love these sorts of if and else statements. So on the off chance you get an output that is neither yes or no, something's messed up, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that the computer's insecure, but it means that you need to review your code, or you need to review the workstation to see if SentinelOne changed something about how they output this or how they store this data. So you need to act on it, so we're going to make sure that flags you. We're going to put that as false, so something's got to happen. All right. Very ahead of schedule. Adrenaline is great. Flag files. So we've talked aboutplists, standard issue stuff. We've talked about command line tools, which we love to see, but don't expect to see. But if we get them, that's great. Flag files are really simple to assess, but are much more complicated to intuit what they actually mean. So this is just a real basic script. It's a basic check. Does this thing exist? The hard part is knowing where to look. And so as you install and uninstall an application as you're testing deployment, you need to start looking at all the places where you think it's going to write data or edit data, because sometimes the flag file is what's present beforehand, and then it gets deleted by an installer. Well, we want to know that too. As you're observing these directories, you're going to be testing at multiple different states so that you can understand what the presence or lack of presence of a file means. Pre and post install is probably the most obvious one. But for a lot of applications, we need to get much more granular. So what happens before or after the first time it's been launched by a user? What about before or after users logged in? Right? And so getting familiar enough with an application that you can tell the difference in these steps means that you can use this sort of information to make grander assumptions about what's going on the system. Let's take a look at Cisco Secure Clients. Anyone who's paid attention to my blog knows that there's a soft spot in my heart for Cisco Secure Client, the umbrella module specifically. So when I was getting this right, I wrote a 3-part blog series about figuring this nonsense out. I discovered, and hopefully is still the case, that when you install the umbrella module, if it locks in, not just install, if you install it and it registers and it actually starts running, we're going to get this preference file. We're going to get this ercstate.plist file only under those circumstances. We're not going to get it until it's actually connected to a server. And so let's find it. So once again, we're going to separate our variables, keep them in a unique place, usually right at the top, so that you only have to change these, so you only write this code once. And we're looking for that state.plist file, and we've got quite the target directory there. We're in the op directory, we've got Cisco, and then we just dig for a while till we find the thing. Great. Instead of just doing a does this exist, we're going to use the find command. More on this in just a second. So, simple syntax, find inside of this directory, target directory, anything named after our target file. And then this will swim through that directory and child directories and let you know if it finds something, if it gets a hit. On the off chance it doesn't get a hit, so we're using an if-z, that just tells us if the return is null, tell me false. Cool, we didn't find that state file, so we're assuming that that's not present, which means that umbrella isn't running. Or if one is, if we don't have a null result because we dev nulled our error output, right? So to brace dev null, at least one of these files was found, so it should be present. We should have a connection. You'll probably notice that I very specifically said at least one ERC state file has been found. Fun story, early on in the 5.x cycle for Cisco Secure Client, Cisco moved this file. And this is one of those times where they didn't really tell many people about it because there wasn't a need to, because who's doing this nonsense except lunatics like me? And so all of my Macs, from our internal Macs we were using, started saying, yeah, the last time that umbrella was connected was this very specific date that really wasn't today. Went into the portal, saw everything was fine, DNS filtering's working fine, we had all the history we needed. So I knew something was amiss here. I went digging, and back in the day, this file was in the data subdirectory from up there, not regional data. And the neat thing was, I saw the new version, but for reason, I'm sure there was a reason, I just don't know what it was. When Cisco started using this new location, they didn't delete the old files. They just left them there. And so that means we had two correctly formatted files with overall valid data, readable data, but one of them was active and one of them was inactive with no further explanation. And so we use the find command here so I can say, all right, if stuff changes again, as long as it's still in the regional data subdirectory, I'll get to it eventually. Even if I get multiple hits, I'll at least see that there's multiple hits. And you could, of course, use automatic remediation tools here. You could say, all right, if we find more than one, look for one at the old location, delete it, right? Clean that up automatically for us as we go. Home stretch, progress checks. So yeah, we know whether or not a file's present or not. Sometimes it's really much simpler than that, and it's just, is the darn thing running? Great. Let's start with pgrep. We used grep earlier to search the contents of a text file. Fine, easy. We're going to use pgrep to search the list of running applications for a string. If you don't know your process names right off the bat, activity monitor is once again great for that. We're trying to bring these things together, which is lovely. And I would recommend kicking open Activity Monitor and just seeing what happens to your application and what's showing up in these lists as you quit, reopen, or do other things to your application based on the application state you're trying to test for. Maybe you're looking to see what happens in the list of processes when a VPN connection is established. That'd be convenient. So, dark mode. Here's Bitwarden. We love Bitwarden, and 1Password and all password managers. But when I quit out of Bitwarden, these two items are just hanging out in the background living their best life. That's fine. If I open Bitwarden, we get a lot more hits, and then we can just continuously quit, reopen, quit, reopen, quit, reopen, and eventually we'll see that this little ad, Bitwarden Helper, seems to only be present when the GUI is actually up. Maybe we're going to be patching Bitwarden. We want to make sure that we do not do an unclean shutdown of that application while someone's changing their password before they have saved it. That would not be ideal. So we can kind of use this to get an idea of Bitwarden's application state before we act on it. Back in terminal, we're going to do a pgrep, we're going to do a process check, and just see what happens if we look for Bitwarden, and we'll get a list of PIDs. Get a list of process IDs that tells us, yeah, there's a lot going on. It's all well and good, but that's kind of a lot of results, so let's be a little bit more specific. So let's get that in quotes. We're looking just for Bitwarden Helper. We're still getting a lot of results. That's obtuse, but so be it. We saw that there were a lot of other child processes with Bitwarden Helper in the name, and that's why we love the X argument here. Normally, when you run a pgrep, it is looking for process name contains. If you add the X argument, it is going to say process name is. It's going to look for an exact match and only return you that match. So especially if you have an application like box, for example, those 3 letters of which could be in dozens of apps across your Mac, use this X argument to make sure you get exactly what you're looking for. In this case, we've got down to a single PID. That's what we wanted. Because I'm bad at letting things go, AC Umbrella Agent is the process that's running when the Umbrella Agent for Cisco Secure Client is happy as a clam and doing its thing. So let's find it. Because we are writing our script scalably, we're going to set our pre-grep value up there so you only write this once and never again for the rest of your career. And then we're going to do an is-running check. So we're going to do a pgrep check. We're going to include some useful arguments. Because of the type of if statement this is, we're not assessing the value, looking at that value, and then acting separately as a variable. I just want to know if there's any output. So we're going to use the Q argument to make the output quiet. Remember, when we were in terminal, it would just spit out all those PIDs for us. We don't want it to actually output that, especially if our script is expecting a string or a Boolean. If it gets 3,195, it will be sour about life. This will give us what we want. And then we're going to use that same X argument so we just get that pgrep value as we've defined it. If we get a hit, we know the required process is running. We've got our true output for that bool. And if not, false. Great. Simple. Write it once, never touch it again. Launch agents and launch daemons feel more complicated, but they don't necessarily have to be. And we've got a wonderful tool for that in Launch CTL. So we're going to be using this to check certain things to see if the Mac knows it should be opening these either at user login or at boot. First place to look if you want to start familiarizing yourself with this, if you haven't in the past, check your root library, launch agents, or launch daemons directories. You'll get a lot of good information there. Start seeing sort of how they're formatted. And you can also use this list command to get a big list of all of the agents and daemons that are currently loaded for your Mac. If you do that, assuming you are not explicitly looking for first-party software, I strongly recommend this grep argument here. So pipe in grep v com.apple. That's going to strip out all of the first-party software from there so that you're going to be looking at like a couple dozen entries instead of a couple hundred. It'll just make your life easier. Be aware that launchctl is context dependent. So if you launch it with or without sudo, you're going to get system level results or user level results. Other things to always bear in mind. And for the last little demo here, who doesn't love vulnerability scans? We're going to look at Tenable Nessus. So we've got com.tenablesecurity.nessus agent as the agent we're going to try to track down here. So starting off, we're going to get ourselves a list. And instead of outputting everything that's running, we just want stuff that matches our little Nessus agent here. And we actually get a pretty cool output. This is going to teach you a lot of neat little things about how this application is structured, what's running, where it lives. So we can see it's a system level item. We can see that it's located in the library privileged helpers tool. Great. What we care about in this instance of is it loaded, is our PID. So we've got a locked-in process ID. This thing is live right now. We've learned a thing today. If we get a little adventurous, if I go in here with a hammer and actually beat up Nessus agent, but keep this agent loaded, we run this exact same command, that PID is going to be gone. So not only do we know through this, you can stop where you want to stop based on your environment, but we know that not only is the agent present, the agent is loaded, but it has a live process ID, and then we can act according to those results. We are always going to bail out our facts. So here, Nessus CLI, because yay, more apps that give us command line interface tools to use. If it's not there, we're assuming something's seriously wrong, so we'll just back out and stop our additional logic. If it is there, we'll pull up that same list we just looked at, that same output that we got before, and we know we're looking for PID. If we get that string, then that means that we've got a process ID for that app. Simple logic. Yes, it's running if it's found. No, it's not if it's not. And that's a thing. Thanks for your time. I have never run this fast before, so I'm glad I stayed under an hour 7, which is great. We take that. QR code on this side is sudoa.com. That's my tech blog. I have a page there for this conference. I am, as mentioned previously, exceedingly tired, so it has yet to have the resources from here, but I'll be putting those up tonight. And then feedback on the side, which means open the floor for Q&A. What are your thoughts? How are we doing? Staying hydrated, jaw unclenched? We're good? See in the back? All right. Now, am I going to ruin Christmas here? All right. It's probably going to get to you and not to you. Close enough.
Thank you. So we've got these scripts now, right, to gather information that we want. Where are you putting that to get at it later, and how are you getting it there?
Excellent questions. We are an Adigy house. So it's going back into my own time machine. I started off in Jamf, moved over to Adigy with the MSP we work with, and we can just create these as what Adigy calls device facts. Adigy has an auditor binary that scrapes that information every 5 minutes on a workstation, which is great. So they've got the auditor, the collector, there's a series of items that pull that out and keep it updated. And so what I'll do for this is when I'm deploying an application, I'll try to figure out which of these I want to collect, write the scripts, and then once I've tested that out on a single device, it gets pulled out and I can use that either in Adigy Go Live, which is like one-on-one sport, if our sport desk is in, and they can actually just pull up a list of all of these and search through them. I can generate lists as an administrator and pull this up across fleets, or we export it to VisionBot, which is our device portal that's customer-facing so that they can look at some of these items. And we can also generate automatic scheduled reports to send to account managers and things like that. And so I got a little bit lucky where the MDM that I use has all these features built in. So I just need to collect the data, and then Adigy can help us get it, where we need it to go.
Thank you.
In the interest of writing code once, your launch kettle list command, the list verb is deprecated in launch kettle. So it may go away in the not too distant future, or it may hang around for a decade and a half at the whim of Apple software engineering.
Cough, cough, cups.
So the print verb is the new hotness, but you will have to specify the domain in which the agent or daemon is running, and it will give you more verbose output, but equally pretty to what you showed on the slide. So just for useful information for anybody that wants to use Launch Kettle.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Good data. Thoughts, feelings, concerns, premonitions of doom. Looks good. Oh.
Turn around.
Hey. No coffee cup, no prize.
I was going to give a tip. Sometimes when I don't know where something is configured on the device, I may use the GUI or something else to intentionally configure it with a random string and then search the file system for that random string.
I like
or
that.
Intentionally configure it the way I don't want it to be and then go look for where that configuration is and detect that and then use that as my detection for all my devices that are on the naughty list, basically.
I think that's a good call. I dig it. Hushed silence. We take that as well. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the 12 minutes back, and have a great close to the conference.